All right, welcome back, everybody. I would like to kindly ask you to take a seat as we will start with our interactive, engaging session. So I'm hoping there's also questions from the crowd. There will be a camera. Yes, I see Fadila ready with a camera, that if there's questions from the crowd. Sorry, camera, mic. Gosh, guys, I went to bed very late last night. My apologies. A mic. There's cameras. So there's a mic. If there are questions from the crowd, please feel free to ask them as well. We've had a morning full of very engaging talks, and now we wanted to not just stop there, because it's always nice to be fed with information, but then the question is, what do we take home? What are we going to do with this? So that's why we organized a short panel discussion following all the informative sessions, with a main question being, knowing all this, Jerome already briefly introduced it this morning, what do we need to enable effective management decisions? Realizing the importance of these animals, realizing the challenges, realizing all these different elements that were mentioned, what are we going to do next? So we have a very great panel. I will briefly introduce them. Some were asked, perhaps relatively last minute, to be on board, but we're very grateful for them to engage in this discussion. So I'm just going to go from my left to right. We have Emma Doyle, representing Whitecast. She has many hats. I think many of you know her, but in this panel she will represent Whitecast, so the sea turtles. We have Dave, who will represent sharks in this panel. I know you do much more than that, but in this panel you will represent shark. It has been decided. Then we have Monique, who I was pretending to be this morning, but she's finally here, who will represent WWF and the Blue Corridor work that WWF is conducting. Geraldine, the Deputy Director of SPARROC, representing the entire Caribbean. I don't know. And then lastly, we have Jeffrey, who is representing CCS and mainly also the whales and dolphins for this panel discussion. So there's a nice variety of marine megafauna sitting at a table. They have to sit there, unfortunately, for the cameras, but before I speak too long, let's start with the head question that I was presented with. And I'm just going to see which of the panelists want to take a go at answering this. Knowing all this, what do we need to do to enable effective management decisions? Who dares? It's a big question, I know.
Is it on? Yes. Yes, I start. Hi, nice to meet you. And still, Stacey, I want to thank you for covering my presentation. I heard you did a great job, so I'm very proud of you. And well, to take management decisions, it's about the interaction of human activities and the occurrence and distribution and the migration route of whales, dolphins, also sharks, and turtles, of course. I think we are currently moving ahead with getting more information about whales. I know that there is still a tremendous lack of information on sharks, especially on the migration routes and the critical habitats. On sea turtles, I think we have, through Whitecast, a lot of information, but I let Whitecast decide for themselves. The thing is about compiling that information. And instead of just focusing on the threats that there are, because they are numerous, but they can be also locally, we have to integrate to see, well, that's what WWF thinks, like, what is the species doing? What is the behavior? Where do they go? What are the critical habitats? What kind of prey do they eat? Why are they at a certain location? And what is at that location, at a certain point in time, is the human threats? And how can we interfere and mitigate those threats? Mm-hmm. So you need to have a look at the lifespan of the animals, and on a more local basis, identify the threats and start working on mitigation. So you can do that really from at a high level, but eventually it's always on the local level. Mm-hmm. If you can move people, work with people to mitigate the threats for certain species in a certain time of the year.
Thank you, Monique. I'm just quickly summarizing. So I still hear a need for data, or at least a need for knowledge. and then also translating that knowledge. Is there anyone on the panel who would like to add to that? Is there anything missing in that answer?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Stacey. I guess I would just add that even in situations where we do have information, there's an important role for the importance of having a legal mandate for management and having legitimacy of management through supporting legislation. And then, of course, the capacity, the human time, energy, and ability to focus to take the decisions. You know, so among us, we all have in common the same managers who tend to work on all of our species and all of the issues and the day-to-day demands of working with fishers, and also working with decision makers and politicians, having that political buy-in and will that also provides the funding to enable that focus on management decision making.
Yeah.
Yes, sure. And due to the biology of the species, we need collaboration. We need collaboration at each level, you know, at local level, between each partner and each stakeholder and user. The landscape, in the framework of the landscape programmation, policy, etc. And we need collaboration between countries, obviously, because a lot of species are migratory species, and we have to take decision at a regional level, international level, please.
Yeah.
Then I'll kind of bridge the gap. I think this is the level of the top level where we have all the politicians that need to agree, and this is really great to have the spore rack for that, but we also need to get the people from the ground. I mean, we've seen Craime doing all the work from Venezuela. We see the kind of hero of the Bahamas. We see the hero of Haiti. We see the hero of there and there. And at the end, it looks like it's come down to 1 or 2 people per island or per place. And if those people would kind of stop, it's almost there's a fear that they would all stop. And then also, there's still some holes in the map. There's still some places where we do need those heroes to come. Like, we did a great presentation on shark in St. Martin and explained how it was complicated, but we did not see any presentation about St. Kitts Nevis, Seba, so many other islands. So for me, one of the first steps would be, okay, who can be the hero for each island and then for each species? And that's going to join what you just said, that in many islands, I'm going to look at Kate right now, where it's you, where she was mainly on turtles, and then she turned into whales and dolphin, and then in Dominican Republic she was also doing sharks, and then it comes back to those people that have to get all the hats because we don't have enough capacity on the island. So we just need to adapt, and I guess, trust yourself, and then just initiate something on the island.
I think maybe this has sort of been said before, but I sort of want to re-emphasize, right? We're talking about groups of animals that are doing things on local scales, but also moving large distances, and they have very specific sort of uses of the habitat. That it's a complicated sort of situation because you have to account for the local dynamics, but you have to understand when the animals are moving across international boundaries, and you have to deal with co-management because you might have 2 island nations and they have separate reproductive units, but they cross when they're feeding. And so if one island has a certain management strategy, but the other island isn't following it, it may not matter, right? And so forming partnerships on our end, we all want to form partnerships, and I think we still need to work at it, but making sure that the partnerships that we form translate into partnerships sort of at the political level is really important, right? Because it's great if we can establish these things, but if you can't change management to fit, this sort of international model that we're talking about, then it all sort of goes for naught.
Thank you. I think that's a very comprehensive answer to a big question. There were some things that came to my mind, and again, I'm going to keep looking in the room if anybody is there who wants to ask a question or add something. But I heard several things. I heard, again, data, the part of the threats, need for legal frameworks, a legal mandate, capacity, partnerships, collaboration. Is there and again, I think this is a trick question, but is there of formula on how to realize, for example, those partnership, on how to establish that collaboration. Because I think if we all see that there's a very good will of collaboration, if I'm not mistaken, it was mentioned in each presentation, and I'm gonna come back to you because I liked the questions that you asked. Thank you. Who do we collaborate with, and how do we set up those collaborations for them to be successful? And then I'll go back to the gentleman in the back. I don't know your name, but I remember your questions were regarding, for example, working with fishermen.
Tony.
No need? Tony. Okay, Tony, I'll get back to you in 2 minutes. Is there someone who wants to respond to my how do we do this question?
I think we're making a good start by all being at GCFI. And yeah, there are others in the room who really could be on this panel from local governments and key actors, but certainly sharing of experience and that peer-to-peer sharing at technical level, at decision-maker level, manager level, I think is really critical, and that's something that I think Widecast Network has always tried to do, is really share experience and to ensure most effective implementation with sound science.
You want? Or? Yes, it's important. I think you need organizations and governments that can take up the leadership, move it forward, find allies, and that can be locally international organizations, other governments, and then try to move it further up to the agenda of other countries. It's like, you need a long breath, but you have to start somewhere, and that requires leadership and commitment of governments to tackle some kind of problems.
I fully agree, and I think it's something else is important is to listen each other, to listen the need, to listen what all the partner and all the user want and need, you know, and just listen and share experience and have a concrete project, you know. It's important to have some concrete project to work together, to try to listen and to try to work together.
Yeah, I would agree. Something that works for Widecast, Birds Caribbean, and CCS is they all have regional coordinator, and those people can reach out more people in the island. So that creates kind of a chain where it can translate and communicate back and forth, adapting to the culture of each islands. Okay, this is what Widecast or what CCS want to do, but in my context, it's a little bit different. This is what we should do and adapt there. So that's the first thing, like adapt to the culture, I think. Then it's easier to create an MOU with this. And then the second thing would be I think, creating a momentum. If you do some action, and that's coming back to what we were saying, if you have a project, if you have a common goal, and you get the same people on the same boats to do the same work, then they talked about it, and then they're like, okay, we did this, but what after? And then you do something after, and then it's kind of like a snowball effect. So the more and more you're going to do something, you can start with something really small, but then keep going with those people and include, like, bring the people from the government on the field. That would always work.
Oh, can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Oh. Yes, and I agree with both of you, but it really works better if you have a concrete problem that you want to solve. It's either a species, like a leatherback turtle, it's either a commitment to have a MPA in one country or multiple countries, because that makes it easier for governments and people that are not the scientists, that don't have the knowledge that we have, to understand what they are working on and what problem we are trying to solve.
Yeah, I think what you said is important too, because the other thing is if you start really specific, then you can prove that this works, right? And then once you prove that it works once, you're more likely to get buy-in to do it again, to change the question slightly, or change the species, or change the location that you're working on, because you've got proof that this works, right? And the more often it works, the easier it gets, the more the momentum builds to have these things set up and sort of these long-term agreements. So I agree with you. Starting really focused is the best way to do it.
Start small, think big, prove the concept, and don't lose momentum. That's my 2-second summary. Tony, in the back. Your question, please.
So I would love to go up there and pull out a presentation and present to you collaborative fisheries research as it's defined in the scientific literature for 15 years now, and the projects that have used that approach and systematically have had success from the ground up working with fishermen. So there's not, how many fishermen in the room today? Professional fishermen? You own a fishing boat and you sell fish? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
All my fishermen decided to go look at fats.
GCFI is really good at bringing in the fishermen, so that's really a good group to learn from. I've participated in a few of the events and seen how involved the fishermen are in this group, and I think that's a particular interest of the GCFI. For example, the MTS, the ISTS, International Sea Turtle Symposium, they're really starting to change the way they're working with fishermen now, because it was just kind of scratching the surface. Now when they have fishermen workshops, they try to always have fishermen there and things like that. And so that's a great start. But like, you know, you say start small and test the pilot and see if the pilot's been tested. It works, the approach works. The first step according to this approach as it's defined in the literature and publications from 2009, 2007, is you identify the problem together, and then all the other steps will kind of follow through. And so it doesn't have to be exactly in that right order, but they tend to be, because they did an analysis of projects that worked and what they had in common and didn't. And they came up with this little order. And it's very simple, and it explains to you what is the advantage of fishermen for working in that fashion, what's the advantage of scientists, how does it break down barriers, what are the complications that you need to explain and work on during the process, because subjects will come up. But there's really no wheel to reinvent. It works. It's been done in certain communities. Sometimes it's done like accidentally, like, you know, people did intuitively and it happened to work out. And others have applied an approach that's defined in this literature, and it works. It works in every territory, in every country that I was able to deliver it.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that's interesting is when you're working in a place where the bridges are burned, it'll take more time. But you start all over identifying the problem. In places where you don't have long-term experience or exposure of the fishermen to the research community, and they haven't burned the bridges, or scientists haven't asked a bunch of questions and then left with the data and never provided feedback, where this hasn't happened, it takes off right away. So that's great. You have, like we can say, virgin communities of collaborative research. It just picks up. And even in places where it's difficult, it still works. It'll just take a little bit more time.
Takes more time, and it's also quite vulnerable. I mean, there's through my experience, just to add to that, there's less room for mistake, but it's definitely not impossible. So I fully vouch for you. Then, building a bit on your input, Tony, and perhaps it's also a question towards the room, but also the panel. What would be 2 or 3 skills you think the people in this room need to have to be able to realize the activities that you just outlined? So to ensure that collaboration, to be able to create those formats, to listen. I think listen is a very important skill. But in addition to proper listening, and I'm a social psychologist, I can tell you listening is complicated. People think they listen, but they don't. So that's a whole skill in itself. But in addition to proper listening, what are other skills that we as scientists, as we don't have a lot of professional fishermen in the room today, what are skills we need to have, or that we maybe need to invest in ourselves to be able to pull this work forward?
If I may, so there is this one skill that is hard for all humans, I think, and that's the idea that you have ideas, but maybe you want to hold back on your ideas and try to understand the other person's perspective before you try to implement your idea. And it's difficult because we're like, oh, we have this fishery in this country, and we know that there's a bycatch problem, and so we want to test this, and we need a marine protected area here, and we want to try some leads, or we want to put a TED in there. Just hold off on that. Respect those people and ask them their perspective and understand it. And once you're able to reiterate to them their perspective, then you start the ball game. And it's a negotiation. So what's interesting is when you apply these anthropology approaches and things, and you understand the community that you want to work in, it gives you a whole set of tools that will help you to not make exactly those mistakes. I mean, there's communities of fishermen where you don't talk to the guys, you talk to the wives There's communities in India where you don't talk to the fisher or their wives, you go talk to the priest. And you have to figure this out before you do your stuff, and then you'll be successful.
So we all need to have a master in anthropology. I have one more room there, then I'm coming to you, Jamie.
Yeah, great discussion so far. I was just going to mention data sharing is a big issue because a lot of us are stuck in this kind of old world of it has to be peer reviewed before we can use it or share it, and I think that needs to change because there's plenty of data out there and a lot of it just sits on somebody's desk or in their computer and it's not made available to the broader community. So that's one issue, and then I think something that can also help that was discussed in a lot of these talks is citizen science and using data from the people, the fishers and other people that are out there every day to try and share that data as well and make it more accessible not only locally but across the region. And that kind of leads to data sharing of samples too, which we've hit a lot of major roadblocks with CITES permits and export permits, and there's a lot of things that kind of halts scientific research crossing borders. And that's something else that needs to be tackled. I'm not sure how to do that, but if anybody has any ideas with that, I would love to hear them.
I'll go back to the panel. Okay. Emma, I see you with the mic. Maybe you wanted to add, I don't know.
I guess the cross-cutting skill that we increasingly need is communications, strategic communication skills, good personal communications, listening, respect, comes down to that. And you asked for 3 originally, Stacey, and I would say having at least one is great, and then have a network so that you can count on your buddies who have really great skills that you can lean on, are only one step away in a network.
That's a nice takeaway.
Yeah, just we were talking about graduate students. You said it, communication, right? Like, communication isn't just talking to people, right? It's talking, it's listening, it's being culturally aware, it's valuing other people's ideas, right? It's a skill that I think probably doesn't get taught to graduate students pretty well, especially in the sciences, where you spend a lot of time sort of fiercely defending your idea rather than communicating with other people. And so I think I'm not sure how you teach this to people, but broad communication, real communication, is important, and it's been said a couple different times. But I just wanted to emphasize that that's not just talking.
Yes.
It's listening and being aware of other people and valuing their input, not just sort of dismissing what they have to say.
How many people here do we have in the room with a social science background? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half, 5 and a half, 6? 6, 7, 8, okay, 9. It's 9 people. I mean, and this room is not even full, so I think there's definitely something to gain, because I hear a lot of that back, and good feedback. And I hope a lot of you will take this message away with you as well, and perhaps consider doing some online courses. I don't know. Does GCFI provide courses in active listening and communication and conservation? Is that something that we could do?
Actually, the last 2 workshops that we've done, if I put my MPA Connect and GCFI hat on, the last 2 workshops have been strategic communications for MPA managers in support of sustainable financing, in particular in Cancun and in Dominica, with our network. It's a skill that managers are increasingly asking for, and it underpins stakeholder engagement and partnership building, which is increasingly important as oceans change.
Yeah. Really good. And then to go a bit back to the content, right? So I also heard Monique say we need to have a specific problem that we need to solve. Are there specific problems that we can already identify that are concrete enough for us to work on? Or is there still too much data lacking out there to pinpoint those problems? I think I know the answer, but I'm still asking it. Oh, and Jamie,
yeah,
sorry.
I mean, I think people have already sort of identified some problems, right? There was that talk about the nursery habitat. So I don't think we necessarily understand which species are found where and how they're using the habitat, and then how that translates to movement in space and time and reproductive fidelity, right? This is just from the shark perspective, because that's what I was asked. Like, some of those basic questions need to be answered first so that you know what the scale of the problem is before you start to spread outward and ask larger questions, right? And if you can get groups of people that are asking the same small scale questions, but they're asking it in the same way because they've communicated with each other, then those data become comparable, right? And then you can sort of ask the same question using the same methods and the same sorts of tactics in multiple places and compare those data. And then you're starting to make those bridges that you need before you sort of launch off into the giant, really expensive, really comprehensive questions, right?
Yes, I agree. You want to go first or Jamie first?
She was first.
Jamie is first, I agree.
I know, back onto the fishers and the community and all of that, but I just wanted to add something, working in Haiti and also hearing everybody's dialogue and Tony talking as well. Something I think is really important, which I realized early on, is there tends to be, and I'm not talking among us, but I'm just saying in general, you know, you have this hierarchy. Okay, you have the PhD scientists, you know, oh my gosh, these are PhD scientists, they're at the top. You have these uneducated artisanal fishers, they're at the bottom. You know, kind of like society creates a hierarchy, education levels, you know, you're uneducated, you're higher educated, you have this much experience, you have that much experience. And one of the things that I think happens is, like, people's value becomes devalued, that they're not looked at as important. And then when you come in with that mindset, I'm the scientist, I'm doing all the data, you're not as important, you don't bring as much to the table, that the local people don't feel the value because they're not incorporated, and their views aren't heard, and you know, their voices aren't included. And that's one reason why we've been successful. And I'll give you a really brief example because I know we've got limited time. This whole discovery of the oceanic whitetips in our waters, the juvenile population, it was the fishers that discovered it. And I came down with an Ocean X trip, big Ocean X, you know, expedition, coming to tag our sharks, and all these scientists were on the boat. I could name 20 of them. You probably all know half of them. It was a whole big deal in this massive boat, and all these different techniques to, you know, catch the shark and tag the shark and all of that. The entire trip, it wasn't any scientist on the boat that caught a shark. It was the local fishers that caught the shark. We went over to the fishers. Everything was done because of the help of the local fishers, or we never would have tagged that first shark. So it taught all the scientists on the boat. They realized we don't need an Ocean X boat to keep coming to Haiti with the big long lines and the big data mapping. We can use these artisanal fishers with their little hand lines and make just as much progress or even more. So all of a sudden the fishers became like the big superstars of the whole voyage, and it became where all the scientists gave the fishers and the locals the jobs that they were originally going to do over the years, and they became the actual scientists in the whole process. So that was just an example of how to not negate the local population and their value and contribution. So that was it.
Thank you, Jamie. Jeff does not want to speak after your your beautiful quote, which I understand, because I think that's something we cannot argue with whatsoever. I'm just checking the time. I know that Emma has an important meeting at 1, so I want to give her the opportunity to be able to prep for that. Are there any other questions from the room, hearing some of the presentations today, hearing some of the challenges we're facing, and also looking at this panel of experts we have before us right now? If not, I would like to give a moment for closing messages to the panel. What would you like to share as a takeaway message for the people in this room? Perhaps it's a call to action, it's some advice, it's a mentorship. I'll leave it up to you to provide an inspiring takeaway message for everybody attending today. Yes, each of you.
On the whales and dolphins side, I think we've seen all the different presentations, and then we've seen that the whales and dolphins really do not recognize any frontier, and they move in between the islands. there is difference between the islands for the regulation, and I think for CCS, the main takeaway message will be we need urgent action with a lot of communication to harmonize those regulations. It needs to happen that some islands we get more data, we get more people implicated in this, and then to go forward, because it's been a long time. They've been severely hunted, I think before we were all born, and we need to recover our whales and dolphin population because they're really, really important.
Save the whales and dolphins, noted. Geraldine.
I would say try to be connect each other and work together and not to duplicate action to be more effective. And if you are not, if you not come from a SPO country, sanitary SPO country, please, if you know someone in your government, just contact us, and you are also welcome to become a SPO country in order to work together at the regional level, because we need to.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Yes, I don't have much to add. Maybe just one thing is like, after 20 years working and negotiating to solve some problems on marine species, it's like you need to understand politics and you need to understand the stakes of the people that you work with to be able to make a change. And it doesn't necessarily require always more data. Data collection is very important, but if you work together in a group, you need to be able to understand what the stakes of the others are and what you can do for them and how you can solve a problem. And more data doesn't necessarily convince governments and politicians. Well, that's just a small thing, but I agree with all the others. Like collaboration is the main thing.
Thank you, Monique.
Yeah, I mean, these days, you know, science is collaborative, and most projects involve a lot of people, and that's fine. And you know, for students who are here, there are lots of unanswered questions. Pursue those. You know, be passionate in what you do. You can make a difference. You can make change. Be goal-oriented, right? Sometimes I think when you're early in it, I'm speaking to students, but when you're early in sort of this discipline, it feels like it's just flooded with all of these people who are already doing everything, and that's not true at all. And we constantly need new people pushing things forward, asking new questions, and collaboration. I mean, that's the big thing, international collaboration.
Thank you, Dan.
You guys make this hard. Building on collaboration, generosity of spirit also amongst ourselves. Networking just depends on being generous with your information and your time and your energy and reciprocity, and that depends on trust and knowing each other. And so it's great to keep up the networking. Keep coming to GCFI. I have to put a plug in for that, of course. And you know, having patience and persistence. You know, marine megafauna, they're key, key emblematic species. A lot of us work with habitats like coral reefs or seagrass. I mean, all these creatures have faces. Corals don't even have faces, and we're trying to fundraise and trying to motivate. So create news, good communications, and keep sharing, I guess. What have I missed?
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I myself was thinking one common factor perhaps we have in the Caribbean, despite all our beautiful differences and diversity, is rum. Because Jake was mentioning in his presentation that Dominica is trying to use rum to save the sea turtles. I don't know, maybe that could work. We're in Guadeloupe. Don't drink too much. So with these final inspirational messages from our panel, I would like to thank everybody for being present today. I would especially like to thank all our presenters who did an outstanding job in sharing all their knowledge, all their hard work of years. I know several of them, and I know how much blood, sweat, and tears goes into it. So I'm very grateful that we are able to come together here and share these insights with each other. I'm really hoping that we can indeed continue on this note of collaboration, respect, communication, but also a bit of patience and understanding. Building that trust is key on all levels. It's not just with the fishermen in the community, it's also with the big decision-making bodies that we have around us. So this was the end of our Marine Megafauna special session. Thank you, GCFI, for allowing us to host it here. Thank you to all the funders, AGUA, WWF, International, the Wilson Dolphins Initiative, and SPARAC. For making this possible, for making this happen. And of course, all the co-organizers, CCS, Whitecast Caribbean, Birds Caribbean, the Caribbean Shark Coalition. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody, but everybody that's here present today, it was a joint effort. Let's move forward.
I have an announcement. There is a Megafauna bycatch cocktail party Thursday at 6:15 p.m. at the beach bar.